I worked as a night shift pizza delivery girl when a creep decided that he orders not just pizzas, but also dates with delivery girls. When I was 20 years old, I worked as a delivery girl for a pretty popular pizzeria in my area. Initially, I worked the late morning to mid-afternoon shift, but when the guy who delivered for the night shift ended up getting fired due to him losing his license because of a DUI, I was placed on the night shift since my boss hired a family friend who could only work my shift for whatever reason. That I really didn't want this shift because you never know if people who order late at night actually want a pizza or if they have other intentions in mind. Unfortunately, my boss was an asshole and essentially told me if I wasn't willing to work the night shift I was fired. I wasn't exactly in a position where I could be out of work, albeit temporarily, so I reluctantly worked the shift. The first month of this shift went by without any issues until I had to deliver a pizza to a house that just barely made our delivery radius. That I punch it in on my GPS and the house was located in a pretty suburban part of the city. I arrive and it's about 11 p.m. The block was extremely quiet, decently lit, and mostly littered with modern townhouses, but the house I delivered to was a duplex. I ring the doorbell and wait for about 30 seconds. No answer. I ring it again and wait another 30 seconds. Still no answer. I'm standing there getting pretty nervous that something's about to go down, but thankfully a man opens the door. He looked like he was in his late 40s, he was pretty tall, maybe a little over 6 foot, and he was very skinny. I tell him his pizza is here and he just stands there staring at me. I asked him if he was okay and he responded by saying, "Yeah, I'm fine, sorry. I got off work not too long ago and I'm zoning out a bit." Fair enough, I suppose. He hands me the money, I hand him the pizza, and as I'm making change he says, "You're really beautiful, you know that?" Not really thinking too much into it, I thanked him for the compliment and gave him his change. I said goodnight and he did too. I walked back to my car and finished my deliveries for the night. A few days later I get a delivery order to the same place. That I head over there around the same time as last time and ring the doorbell. He answers the door very excitedly and said, "Hey, it's you again. How are you?" I told him I was tired and can't wait to go home, to which he chuckled and said, "I know that feeling pretty well." As he was pulling out his wallet. As he's counting his money he asks me what my name is. Being kinda tired at this point and not really thinking straight, I stupidly tell him my name. As I'm making change he asks if he could have my number as he'd love to hang out with someone as gorgeous as I am. Whoa buddy, pump the brakes. I've literally only met this guy like twice to deliver a pizza. I had no idea who this guy was and I'm positive he barely knew who I was as well. Another thing to mention is that I looked way younger than I was at the time. I was told by numerous people that I still looked like I was 15 and I was hoping he thought differently and wasn't hitting on what he thought was a teenager. I'm just standing there awkwardly for a few seconds before I muster out, "Sorry, I have a boyfriend." He gets upset and says, "Oh, okay. I see." We stand there in silence before I tell him to have a good night and walk back to my car. He says nothing and still stands at the doorway staring at me until he finally went back inside once I started my car. I got a pretty creepy vibe from this guy and even brought it up to my coworkers and they agreed it was pretty creepy. Except for my boss, who overheard everything and claimed I was making up stories and trying to gain sympathy for having to take the shift. A week later, as I'm working the night shift, and we get an order from the same guy again, and this is when it finally hits the fan. I arrive at the house at around 10:30 p.m. and keep in mind that from my perspective on the road, it didn't look like a single light in that house was on. I get out of my car and I walk to the front door with the pizza box in my arms. As I'm approaching the door, it quickly swings open to reveal the man, except this time he was wearing a suit and I jumped back. He laughs and said, "Sorry if I scared you. I saw you out the window and figured I just opened the door now so that you wouldn't have to ring the bell." I was getting scared because, as I mentioned before, there were no lights on in the house, so was he sitting in the dark this whole time? And if so, why? I nervously laugh and say it's okay. He asked me if I liked his suit, to which I said yes. He then asks me, "Would you like to go on a date with me tonight?" What the hell? I once again tell him I have a boyfriend, to which he chuckles, gets close to me, and says, "Honey, there's no way a girl your age is in a serious relationship. If you go on a date with me, I'll show you how a real man treats a girl." He grabs the pizza box from me and throws it to the side and grabs me by my arms hard. I'm officially building blocks at this point and trying not to cry from the fear that was overwhelming me. I start pleading with him, "Dude, please. I just want to go home. I don't want to go on a date tonight." He just stares at me with the most sinister look I've seen on someone's face and says, "I don't care. Get inside now. We're gonna have a good time. He starts trying to pull me into the house and I'm trying to resist as hard as I can. After a bit of struggling he lets go of one of my arms and starts grabbing something out of his pocket which I presumed was a knife. I did something that to this day I am still thankful worked as he was doing that. I used my free arm to punch him as hard as I could in his stomach. This stuns him for a few seconds and he loosened his grip on me, allowing me to break free. I quickly run to my car and as I get in he runs at me and tries pulling me out of the car, holding the knife in the other arm and even yells, "Why are you making this so difficult?" I grab a half-empty soda bottle I had in the cup holder and throw it and luckily it hits his head and he lets me go. I slam the door and then all of a sudden he jumps right on the hood of my car and starts scratching and banging on my windshield with his knife. I put the car in reverse and quickly back out of the spot and quickly reverse down the road with him desperately trying to hold on. He's banging on my hood screaming, "Stop the car." I turn onto the next road as swiftly as possible and luckily he falls off the hood of my car. I slammed the gas as hard as I could to get as far away from that sick bastard as I could. In my panicked state, I drove a couple blocks down the street and kept making turn after turn onto other side blocks as I feared I was being followed. Eventually, I reached a red light and I slammed on the brakes and just sat at the intersection frozen from what had just happened. I began crying and violently shaking as I was sitting there. It dawned on me that I came so close to losing my life and I couldn't help but feel like I shouldn't have been alive. Once the light turned green the first pulled over to the side and just sat there crying. Eventually, I get the energy to drive back to the pizzeria and almost immediately after I walk in, my coworker knew something was wrong after seeing me. I practically broke down in front of him and everyone else came to the front wondering what was going on. I fought my tears and explained everything that had just happened. My coworker comforted me and my boss surprised me and began apologizing profusely for what had happened and for putting me on the night shift. He took me into the office and handed me the phone to call the cops. They arrive at the store and I give them my statement, as well as taking pictures of any marks on myself as well as scratches on my car from the encounter as evidence. My coworker followed behind me as I drove home and I collapsed on my bed and strangely enough, I managed to fall asleep. I quit my job the next day and luckily a friend of mine managed to hook me up with a new job at her clothing store. As far as the psycho goes, 2 days later I receive an update from the police. The entire duplex was owned by the guy's brother who lived on the right side with his wife and the psycho lived on the left side of the duplex. I learned that he had been in and out of jail constantly at first for robberies and assaults, but later on, it was for sex crimes. He had been released from jail about 5 months before this encounter for having sex with a minor. When they arrived at the house, he was long gone and his family had no idea where he ran off to, but the police insisted they would find him and indeed they did, albeit not alive. I spent the next 2 months in fear that he would find me and finish what he had in mind, but the police contacted me and updated me on the case. Apparently he fled to another city nearby and attempted to kidnap a teenager walking alone late at night on the street. Luckily somebody happened to be looking out the window at the right time, called the cops, and the police caught him trying to force her into his car. He manages to flee and the police chase after him. He blew a red light near a busy boulevard and a van slammed right into the driver's side of his car. By some sort of miracle, the driver of the van only sustained minor injuries while the psycho succumbed to his wounds long before the ambulance even arrived. I thanked the officers for everything they did and for informing me and I walked out of the station. I walk down the street and I light up a cigarette as I'm taking in everything I had just been told. I don't wish death on people, but after hearing about his death, I felt relieved. I felt relieved that he couldn't hurt anyone anymore. I was relieved that I would never have to encounter him ever again and that I wouldn't have to go through with charging him and reliving what happened that night. My last experience 2 years before this was scary, but I think this one takes the cake as being the scariest as I was alone and face to face with this psycho. Who knows where I'd be if he managed to pull me into his house. Now it's time for the next story. Story 2. My wife's friend exposed her cheating at a party. Now I know. My 36 male, wife, 34 female, cheated on me back in 2019. I was blindsided and I wanted to share because I was told my reaction was a little unhealthy. After I was played like some kind of fool, I wanted to understand why some women were so untrustworthy. My wife had showed me she had no loyalty. Even though I did what I needed to keep her happy. Me and my wife got married 6 years ago and we were in a good place from the beginning. I worked handling the accounts at my company and she was a STNA nurse when I met her. We rented a nice house and wasn't in any real debt. We were good at managing our money, so spending wasn't a problem. We communicated easily, worked good as a team, and getting physical at night was easy because she was just gorgeous and kept her looks up always. Our family had got along good, and me and her brother Jacob was practically best friends. He worked as the custodian at the hospital she worked at thanks to their mom, and we always looked out for her little brother. My wife was clearly an independent woman, and she could always think for herself. She always had a sense of confidence and demand respect from me and Jacob. We didn't have kids, but I felt like if we did, she would be a good inspiration, but the problem with her was that she had toxic friends around her. The way they talked about each other made me feel like they were more like rivals than anything. They would talk about each other all week, but party together and claim they were sisters. Not only that, but they would also get into terrible arguments. Especially when they were drunk that I can't count how many times they had a falling out with each other. Then the next week they would go out on a girls' trip to be on vacation. I was told that girls secretly be in competition with each other, so I thought it was just typical. It could be annoying, but I just took the good for the bad. I just thought it was normal between the five of them. The affair happened when her friend Erica was about to get married. Before the marriage, it's normal to have their wild party, so my wife and her friends left that night to throw Erica the party they planned at the hotel. I knew they were going to be out all night, so I didn't bother waiting up for her. A couple days after the wedding, I was getting ready to hop in the shower that night when I heard my phone ringing in the bedroom. At the time, I wasn't sure if that's what I heard, so I just hopped in the shower. When I came out the shower, I saw I had 6 missed calls, and they were from the same number. This was weird to me, so I didn't call the person back since I didn't know who this person was. When I was in my living room, the number called again, and even though I didn't know the number, I decided to pick up. When I answered, nobody answered me back at first, and all I could hear was a girl talking to a guy in the background. After saying hello 3 times, I just hung up. After that, they called again, and I immediately picked up the phone. This time the girl answered me back and I realized it was one of my wife's friends. I asked her friend, let's just call her Jasmine, why she was calling me. She immediately started calling my wife names and said she cheated on me at the party. This had put a real fear in me, but I still said she didn't know what she was talking about. She said she did know and that she had recorded it as proof to show me. I asked her what she was talking about, and she told me everything. She said at Erica's party, they had hired some guys to come there and dance for everybody. Since my wife was extra friendly to one of the guys, he kept coming back to her and he had crossed the line with her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but at the same time I knew this kind of thing wasn't uncommon. After hearing me not say anything for a minute, Jasmine said if I wanted the evidence, she would send it to my phone. I told her send it to me and she said to hang up while she got ready to send it. After about 5 minutes she sent me 4 video files, and when I looked at them, I had collapsed on my couch seeing the proof. I called Jasmine back, and she asked me did I get it, and while being choked up, I said I did get it. She started calling my wife's name again and told me she was sorry for how she acted. I asked her why she would do this to somebody she claimed was her sister, and she never gave me a direct answer. She just said my wife and her friends were a bunch of hypocrites and called them fake. I asked how she got my number, and she reminded me my wife called her from my phone asking directions for her dinner party she had at a restaurant. She said she was done being their friend and said that Erica was doing bad things too. Jasmine said talk to my wife about it, and I told her she was at another friend's house at the time, but I definitely was. After hanging up, I was falling to pieces. I knew I had to confront her. There was 4 full videos of my wife being with another guy. But after that, I didn't know what my life would be like and how she could do this to me. I never trusted these parties, but I didn't think it would happen to me. I don't even get invited to these things. When my wife got home, I confronted her as soon as she walked in the door. I asked her how she was doing, and she said she was tired but fine. I told her I never asked her how Erica's party was and did she have fun. She seemed caught off guard a little, but she said it was fine. I told her Jasmine said she had a fun time, and that she even recorded her to show me later. She looked spooked and asked me what I was talking about, and I showed her the videos of her and the guy getting it on that night. First her jaw dropped, then she screamed at what she saw. She begged me not to leave her, and said Jasmine was doing this because my wife had replaced her with somebody else to be one of Erica's bridesmaids. She said her and Erica got into a big argument about it with her, and Erica uninvited her from the ceremony. When I heard this, I could kind of see why Jasmine was mad, but not to go this far though. It didn't matter to me because I told her I was getting a divorce, and that's exactly what I did. Through the whole divorce, both of our families wanted us to reconcile. I was told even though she shouldn't have done it, it was a special night for them, and I wasn't supposed to have known. I told them that was supposed to be for the bride, and even if she was, I wouldn't stay with her. I couldn't believe my wife was doing this with this guy, especially in public. After finally getting divorced, I still couldn't leave the situation alone. I got in touch with other guys that dance and asked them about getting women. I even asked women. The women said they don't, but know girls who did it for extra money. The guys I asked said they get girls all the time, especially the bride. One guy said when he started, it wasn't like that at first. But the women started wanting it, and it just became normal. When I told my friends this, they said it was unhealthy and I should stop talking to them. I don't know, I guess it was just how I was handling it at the time, but I don't see nothing wrong with it. I just couldn't get those videos out my head, especially when the guy knew she was being secretly recorded. Right now, my ex-wife lives in her own apartment close to her job somewhere. I used to see her family occasionally and they still asked me to forgive her because of the circumstance, but I can't do it. I hate to admit it, but Jasmine was right when she said my ex-wife was a fake friend, but apparently her love was fake too. Now she doesn't regret it, I hear. Thank you reading through all of this, and please continue to stay genuine.